Welcome, bienvenido. Today is vlog 63 of Metamorphosis Rocks. My name is Roxana, and today we're going to talk about offensive language. And I'm not necessarily going to get into the politics of it. I am going to say it because I've noticed an interesting development in the speech patterns of some political representative at this particular moment. Um, and I realize I grew up in an era where you rarely, if ever, heard offensive language of any kind on TV or on the radio or anywhere else. Um, and I can even tell you, I can pinpoint when this started changing. I was watching, I think it was The Young and the Restless. I want to say it was The Young and the Restless. Back in 1990, when I got pregnant with my daughter, my mom and I would sit and watch The Young and the Restless because it was the one time during the day I had in the later months of the pregnancy, it was just because I woke up. I went to sleep like at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I would wake up at 11. That's when the baby would let me sleep while I was pregnant. But in the beginning, it was just because it was lunchtime, and then after lunch, you really don't feel like doing much of anything. So we would watch the Young and the Restless. And I remember this particular episode where the character of Jack was referring to. It's funny, but it's exactly the way it is. The character's name was Jill, and he mentioned that B word. And I was very offended by the fact that that word was allowed on TV. And the reason why I was upset, is because you will not call a man, pretty much, let me turn this on because, of course, I start filming and the sunlight goes away. Um, you wouldn't, there were many words that you could use for a man, but none of them were allowed. But to call a woman the B word, that was not a problem. And I had a really big problem with that. So a few years went by, and, you know, most of the regular channels would not have any kind of language. Usually that was allowed for like HBO type programming, Showtime, etc. Little by little, I've seen the change as to where some of the less offensive words are allowed on regular TV. And then I noticed that this week a particular person who works for the government decided to basically use all kinds of profanity in his speech pattern. Now, I couldn't care less if this person was a Democrat or a Republican. Happens to be a Republican, but that's not the point. The point is, this person used some very ugly words to describe some people. Number one, you don't call a person a paranoid schizophrenic unless they are. Number two, you don't use that as an insult because it demeans, it takes away the power of the words. And what I mean by that is something that I've been talking about for a while, and yesterday I actually saw Peter Mann talking about it on a video of his. When you, instead of saying that you're sad, you use the word depressed, you take away the meaning of the word, and that's why people don't see depression as a real issue when it actually is a mental illness that needs to be treated. The same goes for paranoid, and the same goes for paranoid schizophrenic, or however version of the word paranoid you want to use. The paranoid is an actual diagnosis. Paranoid schizophrenic specifically is a diagnosis of a mental health condition. And to use it lightly to poke fun at somebody or try to offend somebody, it's ridiculous and it's wrong. And then when you add to that the dirty language, it just brings it to a completely new level. I have often been made fun of because I refuse to use that kind of language on social media. Oh, you're such a prude. No, I'm not a prude. In person, I am a big potty mouth. I have no problem saying it. I curse like a sailor. I grew up around sailors because my husband was in the Navy from the time I was 20 until the time I was 20, I want to say 27. So No, I'm used to the language. I don't have a problem with the language. The difference is that there is a place and a time for everything. And in my opinion, that kind of language is reserved for when you're talking to your friends, hanging out with your friends in your home. That kind of language is not, I don't think, should be in any professional setting whatsoever. And I have a really big problem with people that are in a professional situation because this gentleman is doing a government job at the end of the day. I have a big problem with this person using that kind of language in public like there's nothing wrong with it. Now we can get into the whole thing about, well, he's from this party or he's representing this person and blah blah blah. I don't care. I personally don't care. I try to avoid news like the plague because I just don't understand the circus. I really have severe political um I don't want to say allergy. It's more like I'm just tired of hearing about politics from anybody. So the whole story just kind of took me by surprise because I've been trying to avoid the news, and that particular, but this person just started working, so I wanted to see if it was an improvement to the rest of the circus going on. Obviously, I am not very enthusiastic about it. The bottom line that I want to make, the point that I'm going to make is this: you don't need to use any kind of dirty words or obscene words or profanity or however you want to call it. You really don't need to use that to make your point. You don't. There's plenty of words that are even more insulting in the dictionary than you would believe. And you don't have to use any profanity to insult somebody. Number two, you should not use medical terms to insult people. It's just, it demeans those who suffer from any of these diseases, and it leaves a bad taste in people's mouth. Now, what I wish would happen is that these people would actually get to work, do something productive instead of just spending my money, because at the end of the day, I pay taxes, so these people are just wasting my money. That is true for every party, every political person, in every state. Since I can't do anything about that right now because nobody is up for re-election or whatever, what I'm going to ask is, I'm begging you. And I understand, look, there's a lot of gamers here on YouTube. And when the S word comes out or the F word comes out because they either got scared or they just lost the game or whatever, that is the appropriate use of the language to me. Because it's kind of like, I'm going to give you the perfect example. When I went back, when first came to the United States, I had, I want to say I was 22, either 22 or 23. And I went to a classroom and I went to move the chair so I could sit on the chair because it was like an auditorium type situation. And I caught my finger on this edge of this thing and it hurt like you wouldn't believe. And the first word that came out of my mouth was a Spanish word that starts with the letter P, as in Peter, and ends in the letter A. And no, it was not whore in Spanish. It was the other word. And it has 6 letters. And it came out of my mouth like I said, I have a big potty mouth. It just sang out of my mouth at full volume in an auditorium, which means pretty much everybody heard me. And you could tell that every single Hispanic started laughing. Americans had no clue what I had just said, but the reaction of the other people made them laugh, and I ended up laughing too. That is an expected use of the word. When you're driving and you nearly miss somebody, if a curse word comes out, that's a perfect use of the word. If you get a bad diagnosis at the doctor's office, that particular time you can say any word you want because I expect that. When you're talking about another person, there is no need for you to use that kind of language. There's just not. When you're filming a video, when you're doing a job, when you're working, when you're a professional, you should not use that kind of language. That is my opinion. I would love to hear your opinion below. Thank you very much for watching and have a great weekend.